and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about philosophy and literature and the great ideas and whatever we want to talk about. My name is Thomas Magby. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. AJ Hannenberg and Mr. Graham Donaldson.
Hello.
In today's episode, AJ, you are bringing us part 3 on Immanuel Kant.
Yep, I thought I could get all of Chapter 2 into one episode last time, but I did not anticipate us arguing for 35 minutes of the episode.
Have you listened to this podcast before? That's got to be half of our episodes.
I mean,
right?
that's a pretty solid chunk of time,
yeah,
right?
It is. Yeah, you're not wrong.
But
we weren't arguing. We were unraveling.
there was a little. I think there was a lot. It was fun. Anyway. It was a good time. But we didn't get all the way through the chapter. My hope is to get all the way through the chapter this time, and then maybe have only one more episode on Kant. If that last chapter is interesting, if it's not, I'll move on to something else. But the rest of chapter 2 is pretty good, and I think it'll, raise Graham's hackles a little bit. That's my anticipation.
I'm going to keep my hackles very low.
I doubt
I
it.
do not think that's true. If the first 2 episodes are any indication.
Which is fine. I actually, a lot of this stuff is really interesting to me, and so I think, I don't know, maybe by the end of it, you'll be convinced that Kant is a genius and he's got his finger on the pulse of morality, but I somehow doubt it.
I've been tending to my hackles. I think I...
You've been... How
thing
does one tend one's hackles?
well, the thing is, I've been thinking a lot about your episodes in the months in between them, however long it's been since we recorded.
That's not on you.
That's not on you. That's not all of us.
Okay, yeah.
And there's been we've been getting lots of good feedback from people who sent us emails just to like different ways of thinking about it. Or there's been one guy was like, I was working out at the gym listening to your podcast on Kant, and I've got all these thoughts on Kant. And I was like,
meet
man,
that guy.
I know that guy's like, listen to that guy's podcast. Like that guy's jacked and Kantian.
Shredding to philosophy.
I know. So anyway, there's been I think Kant might be onto something. Maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. I think today might resolve one or two of the concerns you had last time, and then it will add some other concerns, I think, that you might have.
I also can't remember my concerns.
Okay. That was my next question. Do you guys remember what we talked about last time?
Gosh.
Or what we've gotten to?
Was categorical imperative the first time?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
We established the categorical imperative in the first episode.
And that is basically do the right thing.
Act in a way that that everyone would follow the same maxim you're following.
Universalize your particular.
Yes, act as if your maxim could be a universal law for everyone. And in fact, as if it were a universal law of nature that people should do this. That you could not just that it could be that, right? A lot of things could be a universal law, but that you should will that it be so. That's the categorical imperative. What else happened last episode? Do you remember any of the details?
Good intention versus good outcome, or was that the first one? Where we're aiming toward a good. It's the distinction that you were drawing between.
That was probably the first episode where the truly good thing is a good will and not necessarily human happiness.
Yeah, that. Wow. Yep. What happened last time?
So last time we got into a big argument about whether or not the categorical imperative would work sort of as a hack for morality. I contended, and I now am fairly sure that is not Kant's intention. His intention is not to give us a guidepost for morality, but simply to establish morality on some sort of solid ground on which we can argue. Because previous attempts at morality, he thought were wishy-washy. They didn't really work. They were based on empirical things, and we talked a lot about last time how empirical things or experiences don't really work as a universal law of morality because they're only for one instance of things. You can't say just because this law should work here, it should also work somewhere else. You can't take an individual example and say everyone should do this. The next question is why.
Right.
He's trying to establish that why. Where can we ground morality in a way such that everyone should do it without self-interest? And that without self-interest is the important bit. So today we are going to sort of...
What was his answer?
What? How?
What do we ground it on?
The categorical imperative.
Oh, okay.
The categorical imperative is grounded on that it be a universalized individual thing. And last time we talked especially about his self-content formulation, where he says, since you can't ground it on anything outside of the principle, you have to ground it on... It has to be just something universal, and that gives us the very content of it. Since you can't ground it on any individual thing, it sort of suggests itself that it must be your will to a universal law. That is the formulation.
Did he give us a way of knowing if everybody is equally skilled at being able to discern the categorical imperative?
I don't think he says no.
Okay.
That comes up later in the chapter,
Gotcha.
but he makes it very clear no.
And when we are acting as if it should be a universal imperative.
Yes.
Does he think that universal imperative does in fact exist in some kind of moral universe, or
Like a world of forms?
yeah, or does he think that it doesn't, but we all should do it? Like, you know what I'm getting? Like, so how is this any different than saying right and wrong exist and you need to discern what the right thing is. You have a conscience, you have a moral compass that should tell you what to do, versus...
So that he calls the moral sense argument.
Yeah.
You have a moral sense, and
Yeah.
he will argue later about why that doesn't work, and that's where I think some of your hackles may be raised, which
okay.
is great. We'll talk about that. I tried to simplify my episode today, where I don't mind.
I'm pushing my hackles down.
I don't mind when your hackles are high.
Oh, okay.
It gives us plenty to talk about, right? I think you grumping over stuff is a great catalyst for talking.
I'm not disgruntled. I'm perfectly gruntled.
Okay, good.
Like a happy little pig.
So I tried to sort of cut the fluff for this one. So I'm going to try to guide you through a few central principles. And I think, Graham, you might have stuff to say. Thomas, maybe you too. We'll see where it goes. But first, I wanted to actually get to the examples of morality that I hinted at last time that we never really got to. There were 4 examples he gives of the categorical imperative in action. The first one I sort of mentioned, and that is a man that feels sick of life as the result of a mounting series of misfortunes that has reduced him to hopelessness. His life is going bad. He doesn't think it's going to get any better, so he decides to commit suicide. So
Did we talk about this before?
we talked about this one.
Yeah.
It's one of the 4 examples. So this was the first one, is that he decides to commit suicide. The maxim, though, is that he cannot will this to be a universal law, because then the will to preserve life would also be destroying it, and it's a self-contradiction.
Okay.
Right? So logically, this one doesn't work. I don't know how that would work if you were talking to a man who is about to commit suicide, but you say, look, man, the logic of this just does not work out. I don't know how compelling that would be.
Yeah.
But his point is that here it applies because of an instant contradiction in what the man is willing, right? He is willing something that cannot exist both ways. The maxim, therefore, let's see, to quote, the only further question, but one sees at once that a nature whose law was that the very same feeling meant to promote life should actually destroy life would contradict itself, and hence would not endure as nature. So this can't be a law of nature.
But you're just destroying your life. It's not like you're destroying all life.
Well, but life, destroying life, the principle of self-love, right? The principle the suicide is thinking is, I make it my principle out of self-love to shorten my life if its continuance threatens more evil than it promises advantage. So can we want that to be a universal principle that all men should do the same?
No.
No, right? Okay.
What about someone who is going to sacrifice themselves to save other people?
That's not this case. I think.
But would that be would you say that person who makes that decision is making the right choice from the categorical imperative? That
I think so.
You would want anybody to do this?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But I don't know if I would want anybody to do this. If I wanted I wouldn't want a 12-year-old to do it for me.
So one of the things I've thought about a ton since our last conversation is whether or not the categorical imperative works as a hack. And I maintain I don't think so. And I don't think what Kant is trying to do is reduce the complexity of moral questions.
Okay.
Right? Should one sacrifice oneself for the good of others? Well, this is obviously a complex moral question. Who are you saving? If it is 5 school children, probably. What about 5 murderers, people on death row? That's a little more complex, right? And so that question there, he says you can use this as a guide, but I don't think he's trying to reduce the complexity of moral questions. He's simply grounding it on something. Okay, moving on. Second example. Second example is a guy that is out of money, and he is going to try to get some money. He's going to borrow it, and he's going to promise to pay it back, even though he knows he won't pay it back. Well, is that a moral thing? He says, no, because if he made this universal, obviously no one would lend money if no one ever got any back. So then it would destroy the whole idea of borrowing, another self-contradiction. Okay, I think we talked about both those examples last time.
Yes.
This next example is a man that has a talent with a certain amount of cultivation that could make him a useful man for all sorts of purposes. But he sees himself in comfortable circumstances, and he prefers to give himself up to pleasure rather than bother about increasing and improving his fortunate natural aptitudes. So he's really good at something. Maybe he's, I don't know, good at music. And he could make himself better for everyone's benefit, but he's comfortable and he doesn't want to. So should that man, can he will that this be a universal law, that one should relax rather than developing your natural aptitudes?
He could will it, but he would be wrong. Like that is not a good thing that he is doing.
Right.
If everyone followed that same maxim.
So this example and the one that follows it are a little bit different. That there's no automatic contradiction within the example.
Yeah.
But you can't actively will that everyone should do this, that everyone should not develop their natural aptitudes and kind of the detriment of everybody.
Yeah.
And the fourth one, it's the same kind of thing where you can't will it. It's the miser. He doesn't hurt anybody, but he decides that he doesn't want to give to anybody. Lets everyone's fortune be their fortune. Could this be a universal law?
Same thing. It could.
Yeah, but you can't actively will that no man should help his neighbor, right? So that is the two kinds of things that break the categorical imperative. One is when it becomes a self-contradiction, and the other is when you can't really actively will it as something that should be a law of nature. That wouldn't apply. So why don't we, as another example, ask this question: should people sacrifice for men on death row?
Following Kant's policy, we're saying, is there some internal contradiction? The answer to that is no. There's no contradiction there. So you could will that thing, but then you're into the question of, is that a good policy to follow? And then,
Yeah.
I mean,
Could I will that all men should, that if murderers were in danger, that all men should sacrifice themselves for them, those murderers?
and that's where I was going to ask you on the miser one, and you can do it here too. I don't know what tool Kant is providing to answer that question.
It's the same as a categorical imperative, right? Provided that there are men who are on death row that are in danger, can you will that all men should put themselves in danger to save them?
Yeah, like people shouldn't, like the part of it I think is
Like if
maybe,
their cell's on fire and they're cooking away in their cell.
Or they're being transported from one place to another. What if
they
we
get hit
say,
by, and then there's they get trapped on a railway tracks?
yeah, they're in trouble.
Oh, I think you can say that you should save them.
right.
Those murderers.
What if they were being shipped to die the very next day? I think you got to say no. I can't will
feels
that all
weird.
men should sacrifice themselves for a bunch of guys that are going to die the next day.
Yeah, I don't. There's something about it where this is premature, and this is not the way that they've been. It said that they were going to die.
Sure.
So there's something about that seems wrong. Which is maybe the discomfort.
Sure. This is still a complex moral question, right? I don't know that we can escape it by using the categorical imperative. Okay.
But I guess that's my question again with the miser one. Okay, what is he saying? What is the reason that, because there's a cost to giving your money away. You then have less money to do other things. So what is the evidence to say that it is better that people act in a way where they are willing to give their money away, where they're more magnanimous?
He says, for a will that intended this to
Keep their money or to give it away?
to keep their money,
To keep, yep.
would be in conflict with itself, since many situations might arise in which the man needs love and sympathy from others,
yeah.
and in which, by such a law of nature generated by his own will, he would rob himself of all hope of help that he wants.
Yep.
So if this was a law of nature and he comes into future destitution, he can't hope for help,
Yep.
right? So even there, with a little bit of self-interest.
So there's a kind of utilitarianism here. Like it's the benefits that come from it, not necessarily the goodness of giving money away.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It just
Beautiful.
feeds right
Wow.
into what
Okay.
we're going to talk
Go for it,
about,
buddy.
the self-benefits.
I got you.
So quick note, he says that the most typical problem we have is not that we can't figure out the right thing. It's that we really kind of want something. We have inclinations. And so we evaluate it, and then we make an exception for ourselves and make an excuse and sort of justify it and say, yes, but I want this thing, so here's what the situation really is. And then we sort of give ourselves a pass. I think we all do this. It's just
Yes.
it's called self-justification, right? Justifying your sin, and this is a thing that everybody does. And so I don't think he's way off base here. Like, you evaluate it, you know what's right logically and even rationally, and then you're like,
I don't want to do it.
yeah, I want to do something else. And so you sort of change it up. Okay, duty, do I want to read that bit? No.
I think we had a listener write in with that point as like that is the thing that's very helpful about the categorical imperative, to say we're not making rules just for ourselves. We're saying everyone has to act this way. You don't get to have a special out in this situation.
Oh man, you guys are feeding into the rest of the episode so well. That's so great. Okay, but we still need a goal,
Yeah.
a thing we are working towards.
Yes.
So you hinted towards some sort of utilitarianism.
Yeah.
He, I think, recognizes that there needs to be something we are working for, right? If we have to will it to be a law, well, that law should apply to something for some sort of end. Does that make sense?
Yes.
He says, and I quote, "Now I say, let's see. I say a human being, and in general every rational being, does exist as an end in himself, not merely as a means to be used by this or that will as it pleases. In all his actions, whether they are directed to himself or to other rational beings, a human being must always be viewed at the same time as an end." And I will jump a big section and continue reading. "The ground of this principle is rational nature exists as an end in itself. This is the way in which a human being necessarily conceives of his own existence." So we think of ourselves as an end, right?
Yes.
You think of yourself as an end. You think of yourself as an end. I do the same thing. This is the way everyone thinks of themselves. So he says, and it is therefore a subjective principle of human actions. So subjective. You think of yourself as an end, so your actions are subjectively about that. But it is also the way in which every other rational being conceives of his existence. So we all have that problem on the same rational ground, which also holds for me. Hence it is at the same time an objective principle from which, since it is a supreme practical ground, it must be possible to derive all laws of the will. So, because you think you are an end in yourself, and I think the same thing, and so does everyone who's rational, that is the objective principle by which we can act, right? A human being is an end in themselves because we all think the same way. That's the way that he proves it. So all laws must be applicable in a way that supports man as an end in himself. So this is another formulation of the categorical imperative. Act as if your law, your maximum of action, must be compatible with treating people as an end in themselves rather than as a means. Thoughts?
Can I just be clear on what is the difference between a means and an end? So he's saying that people should be treated not as you're using them to get something out of them. Is that what he means by
Yes.
the difference between the two?
Yeah.
So I should act in a way that is beneficial to people, not to extract something from them with no return benefit to that person. That's what he's saying here. Okay.
But is there a time in a person's life when they think of themselves as an end that they know that they should be seen, that they should be used as a means for somebody else? Like, isn't it good that I am a means to the end, to your happiness?
But you are acting in such a way that treats me as an end in itself, right? And I don't think you would make yourself a means to that end, right? And this is why slavery is so reprehensible to mankind, is that you are treating the other person as a means rather than as an end. And I think what you're talking about is maybe giving one's life up for one's friend.
Maybe, but I'm thinking like, all right, let's say AJ that you want to go see a new horror movie.
Okay,
And like you've been talking about it for weeks.
got it.
And I don't like horror movies.
Sure.
I really don't want to see it.
Yeah.
But you're like, I know you don't like going to see movies by yourself. Kind of bums you out. And no one's going to go see it with you. And so I go and I watch that horror movie because you are going to have a great time with a friend watching a horror movie. And I don't really want to watch it. I want to spend $12 on a horror movie. But I'm doing it because you're going to be, you're happy. And I am being a means. You are treating me as a means to your end, which is happiness. And I'm cool with that.
So I think in this case, maybe it is right for you to volunteer your time.
Yeah.
But then if I'm also going to treat you as an end in itself, I know you hate horror movies, man. I'm not going to ask you.
So then you're not going to go to the horror movie, and I'm not going to go to the horror movie, and then
And we're going to go watch Cars instead.
no, Cars 2?
Cars 6 or whatever they're on.
Whatever
No, but
What
that's
is it- what is
my
it, like
point.
boats?
So if there's got to be a point where
Is that a thing?
No, I don't. I'm waiting for RC Cars.
Oh,
Wouldn't that be
man,
a great
would be
movie?
cool. That would be cool.
my batteries. No,
There'll be a whole lot of like, as they drive past.
but no.
Can I
but
ask you something?
Yeah.
So in that movie theater would be AJ, but like a few seats over would be random guy. Like
Yeah.
you would think about going with AJ, you would not think about going with random guy. If a person you've never met before walks up to you and says, "Hi, I want to go see a horror movie. I don't like to go to movies alone.
Yeah.
Will you come with me?" Are you even considering that offer?
No, I would find that would weird me out.
So then what's the difference there?
that AJ is my friend.
So what do you get something out of that friendship?
Yes, but not. I do, but not in this particular evening.
Yes, but like a friendship is not just a single moment. It's that collection of moments. So like you could imagine AJ could ask you that, or AJ could offhand.
So the only reason I'm doing this is for my own self-serving.
That's why people are in friendships. Like it'd be a martyrdom if AJ was only asking things of you and you got nothing from it. That's not a friendship.
Yeah,
So there has to be some equality there.
I guess so.
Yeah.
So Kant
And
saying,
it would be wrong for me to accept that if I know
Right.
you hate horror movies.
but Kant saying that you shouldn't go to the horror movie with the guy who doesn't want to go by himself.
The random guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's no reason to do that. Yeah, you are treated purely as a means, because let's say you'll never talk to the guy again either. Like you are solely a means to him not feeling alone in the movie theater or whatever.
So his actions are wrong.
So in
your
fact,
actions,
his actions are wrong, and if you go through with it, you're doing a
Complicit.
wrong thing as well,
Yeah.
or you're enabling
You're
this wrong
allowing
thing.
yourself-
No, I think your action would maybe be a slight moral positive, like you're trying to do something nice for somebody else. But
You're treating yourself as a means.
What if he needs? What if he's like starving,
Say
and
more.
he's like, "I need a sandwich." I'm like, "I'm never going to talk to you again. You're not my friend."
okay, in both of these things, I think you are treating him as an end in himself. He is in that situation. The rando is treating you as a means.
Yeah.
So your thing is fine, right? You're not treating yourself as a means. You are
Yeah.
treating him as an end, with yourself in slight sacrifice. He would be wrong to do it,
to ask for it.
right?
Yeah, but if he is wrong to do it, am I not then also wrong to deny him? Be like, no, I'm not going to the movie with you.
You would not be wrong. I think, again, maybe if Kant says something different, please say so, but you would be treating yourself as a means to his happiness alone.
Yeah.
And you would be allowing yourself to be treated as
So
a means.
if I allow myself to be treated as a means, Kant is saying that that is wrong in any circumstance.
I don't see why it would differentiate based on others versus self.
So I think let's be careful. I want to say treat it as a means to something that is other than human, right? So if you are subjected to somebody else using you for something else's sake, like maybe they want cash, they want gold, they want, like, it's not humanity at the end of the road. So that is why this other fella is wrong, is because he is treating you as a means for his enjoyment of the film.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, humanity is still the end of it. He wants to feel good. I guess it's not. So he's using you to get to something that is non-human.
Yes.
You are still aiming at the human, right? So your action, I would say, is probably a good thing, right? Or at least to offer, right? That is a offer of self-sacrifice. You are trying to help someone, treating him as an end. His action is, I think, therefore wrong. Yours might be positive.
But if I'm doing it and allowing him to follow through on the wrong action, isn't that a bad thing?
Yeah, then I think you're treating yourself as I think Thomas is right here. You're probably treating yourself as a means.
So then, is there any circumstance where you can treat yourself as a means, and that is a noble thing?
I think, are you thinking of something like sacrifice so your men might get away if you're a commander?
That, or I'm thinking of the crucifixion.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if I wonder if we might accidentally leak into utilitarianism here, where the question is,
Who
what
benefits?
helps the greatest amount of humanity?
Right.
Yeah, I'm not a big Bentham fan.
Yeah.
And
Do you know that he's pickled or stuffed?
Well,
I want to see something like that.
Is he both? Pickled
He's
and stuffed?
preserved.
He's
I don't-
preserved, and
yeah.
someone stole his head like 100 years ago.
Is that the one that's on display?
Yeah, in Oxford or
Yeah,
Cambridge.
the one
Yeah,
that- wherever
and
it
someone
is.
took his head. Anyway, so I guess, is it? I guess I'm saying that's my question. Is it ever appropriate to allow yourself to be treated as a means? He says you shouldn't treat other people as a means, but can you treat yourself as a means for something, or is that an immoral action against yourself?
It's a great question.
Because if you can do that, if you can treat yourself as a means, then what's stopping you from treating other people as a means?
I think it depends on what it's a means for.
Well, yeah. So I would agree with you, and then we don't have a helpful heuristic.
No, we do. If the means is, if you are a means to a greater help to humanity,
Yeah.
right? I think Kant would be fine with this, right? It is a greater help for humanity if you sacrifice yourself so your men get away.
Yeah.
Right? But if you are
What about me sacrificing like James so my men can get away?
You pick some random guy.
Yeah.
maybe.
What am I doing in my company? Be like, hey, buddy,
Star Trek talks about
It
this.
tolls for thee.
To be a good leader, sometimes you got to send one man to his death to save many.
But is that a moral action?
What do you mean? Like, is it a good
Oh,
action?
Is that following the categorical imperative?
I would say yeah.
Is that the whole point of the movies? Like they explore whether because first Spock sacrifices himself, but then they go back and get
of the many.
yeah. But then
Over the needs
but then they go back and like save him. So
Yeah, then he comes back with like a magic life torpedo.
So they undo the whole thing, right?
I'm not sure I remember any of this. I was
you're
thinking of
missing out.
one episode of The Next Generation where Riker consistently failed the captain test, and it was because he was unwilling to send, I don't know, Commander Dinkus into the tube that would certainly kill him with radiation in order to save the ship.
the
I'm thinking of the
Kobayashi
movies.
Maru test.
No, the Kobayashi Maru is it's the unwinnable test.
Yes.
No, I don't like that.
Right? It's the one you always lose. Like, it's almost impossible.
Yeah. Wasn't Spock died of radiation? I
He
don't
did.
remember.
He was
Is
in
that-
the like, and he was all like melting away.
Yeah.
And Bones was crying, and
Yeah.
Spock was like, "Your tears are illogical."
Those movies are great.
And then, but then they brought him back to life with
They
the.
did.
It was
a
the
torpedo.
Genesis torpedo,
It's a
right? Like they
torpedo,
shot
yeah.
it. Yeah.
At a planet or
Yeah.
whatever.
And then Spock was like a blank slate baby as a man. Did you watch?
You should
this?
watch these movies again. They're great.
Which movie is this that we're
It's
talking about?
The original series movies.
I'm not sure I've ever seen
You're
this.
Search for
missing
Spock
out.
with
Yeah,
Spock
Search for
3,
Spock.
right?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
And then Spock,
so sorry,
And then
audience, for what's
Star
happening.
Trek
Nothing.
4, they go back to like 1980s Los
it's
Angeles.
great. That's a great movie. Yeah, 2, 4, 6. The even ones are supposed to be the great ones, but they're all of them are good. Can we
then
talk
one
about
of
Star
them-
Trek for the next hour?
Yeah, and then episode 5, they find God.
Yeah, kind of, but Kant.
Okay, so maybe this helps. So he comes back to the 4 examples and he talks about those with the going back in the criteria. Is it like evaluating them? How do we treat people as ends rather than means? So the guy that's going to commit suicide, clearly he's treating himself as a means towards happiness rather than as an end, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay,
The second one, the guy who is trying to borrow money and he's going to lie to this other fella,
using the guy.
He's
as
treating
means.
other people.
treating
as
the
means.
other guy as a means, right? Thirdly, the guy that is he's got a talent but he doesn't really want to cultivate it. That's a harder one.
Yeah.
Kant says it needs to harmonize with the idea of humanity as an end in itself. And so because he's not cultivating his own things and he's not doing something that could help others, then he's not really harmonizing with it. Same with the last fella.
What if he's gonna make like really annoying music?
And he's
serious.
using us as a
Yeah,
means for
that's
his own
exactly
music.
right. That guy should just quit.
Yeah.
No, yeah, okay.
And the last one is, it's not harmonizing with humanity as an end in itself. And here's the little sentence that I think
Who
might
was the last
help.
guy?
The last guy was the miser.
Oh, the miser.
Didn't want to give away his money. So I think this last sentence might help. For the ends of any person who is an end in himself must, if this idea is to have its full effect in me, be also, as far as possible, my ends. So if I'm the commander and my whole troop wants to survive, their ends are my ends, right? And I think their ends might outweigh mine. Okay, tracking so far?
I guess how does Christian charity fill into this? Like the love that does not require anything in return. Are you not using yourself as a means for other people's ends then? And then you're treating yourself as a means? I don't know.
Yes, there is a contradiction. These,
But I don't know if
Right.
you're treating yourself as a means. You're treating humanity as an end. Are you a means to that end, or are you simply pursuing humanity and you think humanity is better off with more people as like being charitable than so you are treating your money as a means to the end of other people's happiness. Does that make
but
sense?
it's usually the person giving it away. They get something like Saint Francis giving away his wealth, his father's wealth, whatever. That's actually a complicated story. But like Francis gets something out of that too. He gets holiness. He gets to be at peace or whatever. And also people benefit from his wealth. He is an end in that giving as well as the means to the benefit of others. Am I like, is there something there where the charity isn't just that you give money away, it's who you become as a part of giving money away? Like you are an end still in that charity.
Yeah. So I guess virtue, he who is virtuous, like, is only ever going to get good things. Right? Like, you
Yeah.
can't even, I'm trying to think of, like, examples where you're doing something that is clearly noble and good, and you get nothing from it. But in all those instances, you're getting something from it. Even if you, like, martyred for something,
This is
you're
the-
still getting.
But this is the Boethius thing, right?
Yeah.
Of like, even though you're going to die the next day, you can wallow in pity if you want to. You don't have to. That you're giving up of that situation, like you are being worked on as an end in that moment as well.
Okay. All right.
I think there's probably more to say there, but yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Moving on?
Moving on.
Okay.
No hackles?
No,
fun
my hackle, they are in bed, they are asleep, they're quiet.
The really funny thing is that in doing this, I always expect it to come from one direction.
Yeah.
And
It comes from...
I just
random.
never anticipate where the difficulties will be. And that's a great question. Can you treat yourself as a means for sake of charity? Again, I'm not sure, unless you are sacrificing yourself for others. I think you're using something else as a means, like your money or your time or something like that.
Do you know what hackles are?
What are hackles?
It's the hair on the back of your neck. It's the hairs along the back of a dog or other animal that rise if it's angry or alarmed.
Get my fur up.
A long, narrow feather on the neck or saddle of a domestic rooster or other bird. So I'm liking this. Okay, great. That's a hackle. Just in case anyone else was curious.
Okay. So from this idea that we are all ends in ourselves, then the subject of every end is a rational being, right? So that's what we're shooting for. So you have to, this is where we sort of get to the conception of of the human as a universal lawgiver that gives law to itself.
Wow.
I've skipped a thing, but
So heavy now.
sorry, I skipped this. I mean, if I'm going to do this whole thing, I just have to
Gotcha.
read it, right?
Totally.
So he talks about how we have to harmonize our law giving with the human person as both an end and a universal lawgiver, because you are an end in yourself, and because you are going through the categorical imperative, you are both a subject and the lawgiver.
So is it a thing you're creating or a thing you're discovering?
Yes.
Well, okay.
But more creating, right?
Well, I think he is saying, is this something we could will that would be a universal natural law without
Right.
contradictions and harmonize with humans as ends? So I think he's trying to say that this is the actual way that morality works. But if you are evaluating situations and saying this maxim should or should not be, then you end up being a lawgiver, right? You are taking the categorical imperative and applying it to the instance.
Sure.
Right? So that makes you a lawgiver. And the reason we even have to talk about this, I didn't get it for a really long time. And I think the reason he wants this, that you are not only the subject but the lawgiver, is that usually as the subject of a law, right? If you are a citizen and you follow the law, you do it for the sake of something else. I follow the law to avoid a ticket. I follow the law to get, a tax return. I follow the law because of either punishments that I want to avoid or things I want to get. So
Go to heaven or go to hell.
yes. So if you are only subject to the law, the problem is that, say I don't want that thing anymore. The law no longer applies.
Yeah.
He's trying to establish the law as something that is unavoidable. What if I were to give two rips about heaven? I'm going to hell. I had friends that said, I'm going to go to hell. That's where the party is. Thereby absolving their culpability in morality if they just don't want
Right.
if they don't care about the carrot
The goodies.
and they don't give a rip about the stick,
Yeah.
then morality does not apply to them. And he is trying to say, separate from whatever you want, whatever you get, and anything else that's outside of the law itself, this applies because you are the one giving the law, right? If you are merely a subject or a citizen, there has to be some further incentive based on an actual tangible end rather than simply this is duty, right? But because you are the lawgiver and the subject, it will always apply, whether or not you want that thing or not. So, Graham, in your instance, if you are talking about charity, you should give charitably regardless of whether you get anything out of it, because it is merely your duty, because you are both subject to this moral law and the lawgiver itself.
Why can't my categorical imperative be everyone should do as much as they can to get theirs? That's a universal law, baby. Let's go for it. Everyone in the ring, we're going to fight it out. We're going to try to get ours. Try to get your bag. Try to get your money, Magby.
Because you treat people as means.
Doesn't matter. And I'm universalizing it. Everybody, I'm expecting this of everybody, and I want everybody to do this.
But that's the problem, is you're treating other people as means rather than ends.
Yeah,
But they're treating me as means, and I've universalized
Yes, and they are
that.
also wrong.
Why are they wrong?
Because they are treating you as a means.
So what? Why is that wrong?
Because
Because people-
every human conceives of himself as an end.
Yes.
You think you are an end.
Yep.
And if other people treat you as a means, that's not okay.
Why not?
Because
I'm treating them as a means. How come I can't make that my universal imperative?
Because it's illogical. You want to treat yourself as an end and have other people be means, but
Yeah.
It's in contradiction with what you know everyone wants, is Kant's argument.
But we're all competing against each other. Like, you're going to treat me as a means, I'm going to treat you as a means, and we'll see who wins.
I think what you're asking is why should anyone care what Kant has to say about
No,
morality?
I'm saying how does Kant ever think that people are going to come into either moral agreement or get out of the Nietzschean power game?
Because they're reasoning about what ought to be or what is the universal moral law based on, is this a thing that ought to be willed in the entire world, that all people would act this way?
So your question is, what's to make all people follow this law? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, if there's there's that, and if let's say that every person in Kant's everybody in the universe does Kant's moral imperative and is treating everybody as ends, and is that creates a tremendous opportunity for the one guy that's not going to do that, and he's going to treat everybody as a means. And if everyone assumes that, like, I'm just saying, there is nothing compelling somebody to be a Boy Scout.
There's not. You're right. I mean, the question is, Kant's question is not, is this going to make the world a better place? His question is, can you walk up to the one guy who is making everyone else a means and say, don't?
Yes, I can say that.
Yeah, because it's grounded in. But let me finish. Let me finish.
Sorry, Hackles down.
I know
your hackles are up.
Hackles down.
You're like the question isn't will he listen? The question is, can you, with logical grounding, say he should follow this thing whether or not it gets him what he wants? This is duty. It is not okay to treat people as means. Kant is trying to say, yes, this applies, whether or not he is like, maybe this guy that's treating people as means doesn't give two craps about heaven. Right? Maybe that's his thing. Maybe he doesn't give two craps about anybody.
Or being logically consistent. And Kant points this out. He's like, yeah, people probably aren't going to follow this. Doesn't really matter. This is not necessarily my goal. My goal here is to ground morality in something other than I want X. Right? Because then it applies universally rather than only if you want X. Right? Yeah, could I get the guy to stop by saying, do this or I'll cut your legs off? Yes. But that isn't morality. That is a threat, right? Kant is saying morality has purchase on every person, whether they follow it, whether they want it, whether it's actually going to make the world better, doesn't matter. He is saying this is morality and not, therefore, everyone will be a good person. He's not taking that next step. He hasn't, in fact, I think something that I haven't talked about yet, he's saying, look, this is the formulation, and it comes from pure reason. I haven't even established that pure reason is a thing. So we're making already a jump that I'm going to establish in the third.
He says that? He acknowledges that?
I, as far as I understand it. Yeah. I mean, again, not a philosophy PhD. Yep. But he says the critique of pure reason happens in chapter 3. As of right now, we haven't proved that hardly any of this exists. But rationally, this is morality. You are a lawgiver, and because you are the lawgiver, you are also subject to the law. And therefore, it is your duty. And because all of us have to treat humans as ends, and we are all lawgivers, this means we are a kingdom, and this is the next section. We are a kingdom of ends, where, Graham, you have things you want. You want a nice house. You want your dog to be safe. You want your wife to be safe. You want to clean up those trees. Because you are an end to me, then I have to treat some of the things that you want, your ends, as my ends, right? This actually sort of establishes charity. And this is his goal. Could people make it their categorical imperative to poop on the little guy?
Yes.
Yes. Kant would point out, you're being inconsistent. That's not morality. You are doing it wrong. The guy doesn't have to listen, but Kant would be right, I think.
Why is that not consistent? Because you're treating them as a means?
Yeah.
And the reason that treating people as means is bad is because
every human alive conceives of rational beings as ends in of themselves.
Or they conceive of themselves as an end.
Yeah, and because everybody does that, humans are ends. And I think your issue is that that's a weak spot.
I guess I'm saying, like, congratulations, weakling. You think of yourself as an end, but I don't care. I mean, I guess the fact that people are like me compels me to treat them like I want to be treated. Doesn't make sense to me. Like, I don't understand how he says that is a priori.
So the logical jump there, I also have trouble with. His jump to man or any rational being as an end in itself, simply because that's the way we conceive of ourselves,
Yeah.
seems to me to be spurious.
It's like, hey, Graham, AJ thinks about himself in the same way that you think about yourself, so you should treat AJ as someone who thinks about himself in the same way you think about yourself.
Well, I think it's because you, as thinking of yourself as an end rather than a means, you expect people to treat you as an end. So does everybody else.
I don't know if that's true. Then this was my first point, is like, are there times when you give up your being treated as an end to be a means for somebody else's end, and is that not cool?
It would not be cool. It would be not cool of the other person to ask that of you. Right.
But then there's something where it's like, wow, this poor guy doesn't want to see the movie by himself, and he's obviously gotten to the place where he's just asking like a stranger to go to the movie, and sure, it's kind of sad, but
Say no to that. What? You shouldn't go to that.
you don't think that's nice? Poor guy?
If you don't know who this person is, don't go to the movies with strangers. I don't know.
That's just because of a safety thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. Yeah.
So where I thought your guys' issue would come was that leap to human beings or any rational being as an end unto itself. Do dogs not consider themselves an
gosh.
end in themselves?
I don't want to do this again.
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't have to extrapolate it that far to
Yeah.
say that creatures also consider themselves an end in themselves. They eat, they take care of themselves. There's also, why not?
They don't sacrifice themselves for other. I mean, maybe like the parents do.
Well, why not? Why not God is the end in himself? Why is he not the end? As far as my understanding of Scripture is that the purpose of humans is to glorify God
and enjoy
him forever. We are a means
To that
to
glorification.
the glory of God. So is there a balance there? This is where I expected the issue to come from. Do you guys not think that? You guys are okay with human beings being means?
Does
Like,
Christ use himself? Is Christ, when he empties himself and did not consider God a thing to be grasped, as they talk about in Philippians, the Philippians hymn, and Christ empties himself and becomes man to die on the cross? Is that not him acting as a means to our end? Is that not the sacrifice? Is Christ's sacrifice not a means to an end?
I mean, he's
Is he
coming
not-
back.
Huh? He's coming back.
Yeah.
So then that kind of makes it feel like it's like, oh, well, then it wasn't that big a deal.
Is Kant intentionally trying to provide an a-religious or just with no regard to religious system of morals?
I think so.
He wants
I
to
think
base
he's-
it on reason, pure
Yeah,
reason.
it has to be a priori, I think, because well, let's jump to this. The next section is why other systems don't work.
Okay.
Right. I'm skipping over the rest of the Kingdom of Ends. It's fun. He's basically trying to unite all of man under this morality. It's not just your morality, but because we are a kingdom of ends, as each one of us being a subject and universal lawmaker, then it's a kingdom, right?
Yep.
Morality is applicable to all. Then talk about dignity and price, blah, blah, blah. Comprehensive review. Probably would have been helpful. Okay. All right. So then he says special problems with previous empiricist principles. So let me read one about one's own happiness as the guiding principle of morality. The principle of one's own happiness is, however, the most objectionable. Not because it is false, not just because it is false, and because its claim that well-being always adjusts itself to well-doing is contradicted by experience. So just because you think this will make you happy, that will always mean that you do a good thing. Not merely because it contributes nothing whatever towards establishing morality. So if we base it on human happiness, what does that mean for? We don't really know quite what that means, human happiness, and what will actually lead us there, and so it doesn't necessarily establish morality. Since making people happy is quite different from making them good, and making them prudent or clever in seeking their own advantage is quite different from making them virtuous. It is most objectionable because by basing morality on sensuous motives, which undermine it and totally destroy its sublimity, since it puts the motives of virtue in the same class as those of vice and teaches us only to become better at calculation. The specific difference between virtue and vice is completely obliterated. When you engage in vice, you are trying to feel happy.
Right.
And he's saying, then if we base morality on trying to feel happy, what is different between virtue and vice?
Would he just define virtue as that which is in alignment with the categorical imperative? Or does he,
Wait, what's that again?
like, what does he mean by virtue if he's trying to restructure morality, or if he's trying to give this tool of the categorical imperative?
I think you would say acting in accordance with that,
yeah.
as humans, as ends in themselves, in a kingdom of ends,
Yeah.
and such that your maxim can apply to everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, happiness is complicated when it comes to those sorts of things because it's like it comes in these different layers. I don't know. Like, I know that eating a donut right now would make me happy, right now eating that donut. But I also know that like a life of health is also going to make me happy in the long run, and so I have competing happiness, and so. But just because happiness has these competitions doesn't mean that it should not. You can't use that as a metric for deciding what to do. Like he's saying, people go after vicious things and that makes them happy. Therefore, because they want to be happy. Therefore, we're not going to use happiness as our basis for morality. It's like, well, but there's greater happiness. Like there is also a happiness that comes with morality. Like, do you see what I'm saying?
But then see, you're deriving happiness from morality, not morality from happiness.
No, but I can say like, oh, I should be a disciplined person because I know that when I am disciplined, I'm actually going to be happy. Like I think it's going to be better for me. So I'm going to do the moral thing.
So you said you've already identified it as moral and said, therefore it will make me happy. He's okay with this. He's saying you cannot say this thing will make me happy, therefore it is moral.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So he says happiness does not work, like human happiness, the thing that will make you happy is not a good guide.
Sure.
So maybe he's answering kind of the modern notion like do what feels good or you do you or do what makes you happy. He says that's not a good way to do it because it's the same as vice, right? Which I think we've seen in effect.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
Okay.
On board.
Now let's talk about moral sense, right? Just feeling out what is right and wrong. He addresses that too. On the other hand, moral feeling, this alleged special sense, however shallow be the appeal to it when people who are unable to think hope to help themselves out by feeling. So if you can't think right and you can feel out what's good, even when the question is solely one of universal law, and however little feelings, differing as they do naturally from one another by an infinity of degrees, can supply a uniform measure of good and evil. So our feelings are always really different about what's going to happen, so make a pretty bad measure of good and evil. Let alone the fact that one person by his feeling can make no valid judgments at all for others. So just because you feel that it is right doesn't mean that others have to do it. Moral feeling still remains closer to morality and to its dignity in this respect. It does virtue the honor of ascribing to her directly the approval and esteem in which she is held, and does not, as it were, tell her to her face that we are attached to her not for her beauty, but for our own advantage. So he says that actually works better. So this moral feeling, even though people feel different things, and by a bunch of degrees, and just because you feel that this is right doesn't mean anyone else should follow it, at least that's better than saying, I do this for my own happy advantage, right? With me, Graham?
Kind of. How's Kant going to get out of using reason, which is a tool, or which is a method? How is he going to use that to get to the ought statements? We ought to do this. He's saying that I can ground my we ought to do this. Well, he grounds it in
Humanity is good.
Humanity is good and the moral imperative. But where does he even get the standard to say that those then are desirable or good things? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like at some sense you have to posit something metaphysical.
Well, I think that's probably where he gets human beings are an end in themselves. Like he gets there a little bit logically, but he says this is how you conceive of yourself. You think man is good because you think you are good.
Yeah. What if we're all? But I mean, like, what if we're all wrong? No, like, how does he?
It doesn't matter because that's the way we function.
He says this is how we. But so,
are you trying to establish a good outside of humanity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, what's his relationship to the idea of the tower, the idea that there is an objective morality out there that we are in, as opposed to we are creating it ourselves based on these, based on two starting blocks, the starting blocks of we're all ends in ourselves, and then using a categorical comparative.
So I think what he's doing, and I think you actually might be amenable to this, is he is trying to say that the Tao is not just something that exists that we have to look for. He's saying it has a rational grounding. So he is trying to tie the Tao.
I don't think I'm cool with that.
No, he's not trying to I mean, he might be trying to establish it, but he's not just saying like there's the Tao and then there's rationality and they're separate. He's saying the Tao is a rational thing, right? That we can have grounded in rationality. And he might be overweighting that and saying the Tao springs from that. But I am okay with the project of saying the Tao is not just a thing that we are compelled to follow and something that humans naturally do. It has a rational grounding in and of itself, right? I am a universalist. I think that there are universal principles that undergird every human action. He is trying to say these things that we do, these virtues, are rational things that have purchase on the human, whether or not they want heaven or hell, or they want happiness or unhappiness, or whatever they feel. It is rationally a thing. It is also a thing. Like he's attaching the Tao to the earth with rationality, which is, I think, a good project.
So it's reasonable. It's rational.
Yes,
What you're saying.
the Tao is a rational thing.
Then if there is something that can have reason, it is de facto going to have ethics.
He actually says that this applies not just to humans, but to all rational intelligences.
So any computer that we make that is, I guess, what's the difference between like a computer that can do, like an AI that can do a lot of function, that can do like a lot of data analysis, like, the chat GTP or that thing is called GPT. It's not actually like thinking through the essay.
Correct.
It's just like giving.
It's not aware.
It's not aware.
And I
so
think
is that what it needs to be?
I think the awareness there is it cannot possibly conceive of itself as an end.
Right.
Right? We can program it to.
Oh, gosh.
But it can't conceive of itself as an end, and therefore can't conceive of, we can program it to think of us as ends. And this is, I think, where we get our foundational principles of robotics. Right? It is never harm a human.
You're talking about the Asimov ones?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
funny. Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember what they are. But
People still talk about those and use
sure.
them in robotics.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, perhaps an outflow of what we have here, which is saying that humans are ends in themselves because this is the way we conceive of ourselves. Robots aren't yet. Computers aren't yet.
But now we've used different terms. We've used reason, we've used rationality, and now we've used awareness. Those seems different.
So awareness, I'm not equating to reason and rationality. Awareness, I am saying that the machine cannot possibly conceive of itself as an end until it is self-aware.
Can a machine be rational?
It can.
could it be rational?
Yeah.
Sure, but like ours are not.
Okay, so if it could be rational, then does that machine have? Does that? As far as Kant is concerned, that machine is going to be bound by ethics.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's we've got commander data
Yeah.
bound by ethics.
Nah,
machine.
Just turn them off.
Just end the whole technology.
That would not be treating him as an end, Graham.
There we go.
He's not
Would
an
it be
end. He's a robot.
if he is self-aware
Yeah.
and he's a rational creature?
Yeah, why not?
Can you walk up and just flip off data and be like, "Screw you, pal"?
Yeah. Or turn his power switch off. That'd be messed up. That's
not?
That
terrible.
would be messed up. That's
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
It wasn't mean.
Because he's self-aware. He's
Yeah.
a creature. You'd be chill with somebody walking up and turning off data. I wouldn't.
Because that would be equivalent to like killing. I mean, not data can be turned back on, but that's equivalent to like killing someone, right? In the lore of Star Trek, right?
Sure.
Why are you uncomfortable with this, Graham?
I don't know if I am.
Okay. While Graham thinks,
Yeah.
one last thing, and that'll actually, I think, finish my episode.
Yeah. We should.
So why can't we use God and Jesus as our source of morality? Last one. The first question is, why can't we use a conception of perfection? Why isn't perfection the thing where we derive morality? Well, he's like, first, we don't know it. It's not really part of this world as far as we're concerned. Mm-hmm. So it ends up being circular because we're evaluating perfection based on a standard we already sort of have in our heads, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't clearly see it and say, yes, this is perfect, therefore morality.
Yep.
And we can't really use God because...
Well, we have reason in our heads. Well, finish.
So, still, it is better than the theological concept, which derives morality from an all-perfect divine will, not merely because we cannot directly apprehend God's perfection, we can't fully understand it, and can only derive it from our own concepts, right? So we only can conceive of God as where we are, among which that of morality is preeminent. So we already sort of have a morality in there, and we're sort of evaluating God's actions there. But because if we do not do this, the concept of God's will that remains for us is made up of such attributes as lust for glory and dominion, bound up with frightful ideas of power and vengefulness. Inevitably, the foundation for a moral system that would be directly opposed to morality. Yet if I had to choose between the concept of moral sense and that of perfection in general, God included, so like just this feeling of morality, I should decide for the latter. For this, since it at least withdraws the decisions of the question from sensibility and brings it before the court of pure reason. So we're into perfection in God. So I think that's better than just feeling it out. Even though it there decides nothing, does still preserve undistorted the indeterminate idea, far more a far more precise definition. So we can't use God because if we're honest, when we look at the scripture, we're sort of already evaluating, okay, Jesus' actions were helping people. That's good. We're not deriving our good from it. And because we only have a limited understanding of who God is, and so any morality we derive therefrom would be busted. But because if we did derive it directly from the actions of God, we should also imitate wanting personal glory, being vengeful, being jealous, being like having dominion. And that might not be the best thing for us.
It's so interesting because he's not saying that you would look to Scripture for something. He's saying that you'd look from the actions of God. You would try and understand from how
what God did.
Yeah, and that just seems strange for him not to look to
Acknowledge
theology
it, like
or Scripture.
command,
That
Well,
kind
he's saying, I guess people say, do we derive it from the divine? We try to be like the divine, and that's where morality comes from. And he's saying, no, that's not really the thing. We can't derive it from the actions of God, which honestly...
But can we derive it from God's commandments to us?
Probably yes.
Yeah.
But even then we also sort of recognize the goodness in Scripture and then say, these fit, which kind of jives with the question I had all the time growing up when people said, be like Jesus. And I was like, he did a lot of things I probably shouldn't.
Sure.
Claimed to be God.
Sure. Flipping over tables.
Shucked people out of church. He had a bunch of followers that he would, tell to do things, and he had prophecies and let people praise him and lay palm fronds in front of him as he rode into... There's a lot of things I probably shouldn't do that Jesus did.
Yeah.
But there are things I should do, and that's heal the sick. And so where am I getting that evaluation from? There are actions of Jesus I should not do, and there are actions of Jesus I should.
Yep.
Well, clearly there's some other standard by which I am sort of bonking these against,
right,
which might be the Tao, which has a rational basis.
Okay, well, help me think through this.
Sure.
Let's say I'm very poor. I don't have very much money and I'm starving.
Yes.
And I break into a rich man's house.
Okay.
And I raid his fridge and I'm sitting down in his kitchen and I'm eating a sandwich.
Yes.
And the rich man comes out and he's like, hey man, what are you doing? Get out of my house. You shouldn't be eating my food. Why am I doing a wrong thing?
Wait, are you the rich man or are you
the poor man.
Poor man. Because you are treating that man as a means to an end.
But
the end is like
But
feeding
the end
yourself.
is feeding
A human.
a human. Why isn't he not treating me as an end?
If he was to do the moral thing, he would say, keep the sandwich. He would do exactly what Jesus says, which is if a person steals your coat, or your shirt, give him your coat.
So I can come into his house and he should let me have the sandwich. And I have given him the opportunity to do a moral action.
You are doing the wrong thing. He
Why?
is doing the right
Why
thing.
am I doing the wrong thing?
Because you are treating him as a means to an end, which is your sandwich.
But I should how come I can't say is the reason because I can't say every poor person should go into a rich person's house and get their food?
Yes, and it doesn't harmonize with the idea of humanity as an end in itself, that if he's got more than you can go take all of his things. Like, should everyone do this? No. Should we have it be a law of nature that poor men can rob the rich? No.
But why shouldn't poor people be able to do it? Not all people, but people that don't have enough.
In Kant's framework, it's the treating people as means. You're taking something from someone is the wrong part there.
But I'm taking something from someone that when the moment happens, realizes that he should be giving to me. Because when he's going to treat me as an end, he's going to give me a sandwich.
So someone in need, sure.
Yeah. So then why is my action that prompts his good action immoral?
So the asking for that sandwich or the seeking it out, it's the theft is the problem there.
Yeah.
Because you're not giving him the opportunity to
Okay, what if
give.
I go and I ask him for a sandwich and he says no, and then I go and I take the sandwich and then he says, "You're right, you should have had this."
Don't take sandwiches.
He was probably in the wrong saying no, which, God says those that asks you should give to.
Yeah.
And
Every time, so every person who asks me for a thing, I'm in the wrong if I don't give it to them.
I think the scripture was meant to those in need. If I come up and I say, "Hey, can I have your house?" I'm definitely doing a wrong thing, and you are also doing a wrong thing and giving it to me.
Okay, the poor man says, "Can I have your house?" I say no. The poor man says, "Can I have a sandwich?" And I say yes. The poor man says, "Can I have a sandwich every day?" And I say no.
He's
And he
beginning to
says,
treat you
"Can
as a means
I-"
to his own hunger.
But he's treating me as a means to his own hunger. But if it is moral for me to give him a sandwich on a Monday, but not every Monday, why is that? Why is it moral to give the sandwich once, but not every day?
Because it doesn't harmonize with the idea of man as an end in itself, because at that point you are enabling a bad behavior and he has things that he could cultivate to be a better person.
So perhaps but why am I not enabling the bad behavior on the first sandwich?
Because he might actually need a single sandwich.
But he might actually need a sandwich every Monday.
But the pattern, at that point you need more information. Does he need a sandwich every Monday because he's literally incapable of working, cannot leave your doorstep? In that case,
The answer might be yes.
The answer might be
give us
yes, a sandwich every Monday.
This is my point, which is every time we talk about Kant, the phrase we usually say is, "Well, we're going to need more information before we can make a categorical imperative." And how can something be a categorical imperative when there's no such, like, if you're going to have to go and get so much details, you no longer have categories. You have just like individual specific things that are happening.
Well, we've demonstrated it, right? Where the information matters, and then if you can extrapolate that this be like a law of nature for all men. So just because it needs more information in the specific instance, the question is, okay, should this continue happening? Is this something that should happen for everybody all the time? And I still think that, like, we've applied it several times in this line of questioning, where
Because I think the imperative here is that those with means ought to feed the poor. That's your question, and I think that could be an imperative.
I agree with that, but I don't know how we get to that reason. It's reason that gets us to that conclusion.
We want to treat others as ends in themselves.
Why is treating others as an end in themselves a reasonable conclusion?
okay, so that's actually, and I agree with you there. I still, that's the biggest problem I have with this section, is that I think that him saying man is an end in himself, that is the weakest part of him putting this together, right? That we are simply an end in ourselves because that's the way we conceive ourselves, and that's the way everybody does. He, in fact, does almost the same thing with the free will question later. He's like, we all sort of assume it, so I'm going to dodge it. And he actually even admits, like, I could get way into this, way super into the weeds, but honestly, for the sake of my argument, it doesn't matter.
That's funny.
It matters that we think we have it, so I'm just going to roll with that we have it.
Yeah.
And here, I think you're right. I think him saying man is an end in and of himself is the most poorly established part of this entire thing. But if I ask myself, is man an end? Should I ever treat man as a means? The only situation is if I'm considering God's glory, right? Because at a certain point, if you are a believer in predestination, those who are destined for hell are a means to God's glory. Those who are glorified are a means to his glory. But I thought about this a bunch. God doesn't treat us just as means. He also treats us as ends because he sacrifices himself for us.
Right.
So is man an end in himself? I think it needs more treatment than what he gave if I'm going to base an entire moral system on it. Like, honestly, I do. I don't think he establishes it well. But is man an end? I think so. Does the categorical imperative apply largely? I think so. Is it nice to have a rational grounding for the Tao and say, look, man, you might not be a Christian. You might not think good exists. You are still subject to these laws of morality because of rationality. You have a thinking mind. I think that's a good thing. I don't think it's good if people use it as to excuse themselves from religion, right? Because, the real question is whether God exists or not. But is it good to have a rational grounding for it and being able to say, yeah, moral laws aren't just moral, they are also rational? I think that's nice.
Yeah. I like it.
Are we out of time?
I think we're like way out of time.
Like way out of time.
Yeah, let's save it for the in-between episode. Listeners, you can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/classical stuff. We're going to record an in-between episode right after this. So if you want to hear this conversation keep going, check out the Patreon. You can find us on Twitter, twitter.com/classicalstuff, CLSSCAL stuff. You can email us, the guys at classicalstuff.net. And you can find us on YouTube. I'm probably still very behind on our episodes, but we're there. So you can watch us there. What did I forget?
I don't know. We like you guys a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. And we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Ciao.